The rain fell in slow, deliberate drops that morning, like heaven itself had paused to listen. Inside a crumbling room, Amina knelt on the cold cement floor, her voice raw and trembling. She wasn't praying for a miracle tomorrow. She was daring heaven for a new thing today. And though the world outside moved like nothing had changed, something in the unseen had just shifted. The rain fell in slow, deliberate drops that morning, like heaven itself was pausing to listen. The sound of it hitting the cracked roof was steady, almost like a rhythm, almost like a prayer. Inside the small house on the outskirts of Abadan, a woman knelt by her bed, her knees pressing into the cold, uneven cement floor. Her name was Amina Okoye, 34 years old, mother of none, wife of none, and a woman whose life felt as though it had been stuck in a loop for a decade. "Lord," she whispered, her voice trembling, "do a new thing in my life today." She had prayed those same words for months, maybe even years. She didn't know anymore. The weight of unanswered prayers pressed against her chest like an invisible boulder. Her eyes traced the tiny cracks on the wall in front of her, as though they held a secret passageway to God's throne. Once, she had been a woman of laughter, of light, of loud singing at church. But life had a way of dimming flames slowly, silently. The bakery where she worked had closed down after the owner fell ill. Her fiancé, Colin, had walked away just 2 weeks before their wedding, saying he needed something more stable. Friends had disappeared one by one, like sand through open fingers. And now, years later, Amina found herself in a stagnant pool of waiting, wondering if the God she had loved so fiercely still heard her cries. This morning was different. She didn't know why. Something inside her refused to pray in the usual quiet, polite way. She pressed her hands against the floor, lifted her head, and cried out louder, tears sliding freely down her cheeks. "Father, I'm tired," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm tired of waiting for something to change. I'm tired of waking up to the same ceiling, the same silence, the same pain. Lord, do a new thing in my life today. Not tomorrow. Not someday, today." The words hung in the air like a sacred vow. Outside, a rooster crowed lazily. Life went on around her, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. But inside her chest, a storm had begun to stir. By noon, Amina decided to do something she hadn't done in months. She left her house. The streets were muddy from the rain, and the air smelled of wet earth and roasted corn from a woman grilling by the roadside. Amina pulled her faded shawl tighter around her shoulders as she walked toward the market square. She didn't have money, not really. But she told herself she just needed to breathe different air. As she passed the bus stop, a young man in a dark blue suit rushed past her, accidentally bumping into her shoulder. I'm so sorry, Ma," he said quickly, flashing an apologetic smile. He carried a box wrapped in brown paper. "It's okay," she said quietly. He nodded and hurried off. It was a small thing, nothing remarkable. But somehow, that brief encounter nudged her heart like a whisper. "Today is different," it seemed to say. She found a spot near the old mango tree in the market square, sat on the low bench, and watched people move like currents in a river. Children ran barefoot through puddles, traders shouted prices, an old man preached with a Bible held high, his voice echoing across the square. "God is still doing new things," the preacher shouted. "Even today, He can turn your mourning into dancing." Amina looked away, a soft scoff escaping her lips. She had heard it all before. Still, she stayed. At around 2 p.m., just as the sun broke through the gray clouds, something unexpected happened. A woman in a bright yellow dress approached the bench and sat beside her. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with kind eyes and a face full of lines that seemed carved by both laughter and pain. "My daughter," the woman said gently. "You've been sitting here a long time. Are you waiting for someone?" Amina hesitated. "No, just thinking." The woman smiled knowingly, as though she'd heard that same answer 100 times before. Thinking can be good. But sometimes, we sit in one place too long because we are afraid to move. Amina frowned slightly. "I'm not afraid. There's just nothing to move to." The woman studied her for a long moment, then said softly, "When God wants to do a new thing, He doesn't always wait for you to feel ready. He just does it. The question is, will you rise when He moves?" The words felt like a hand reaching into her chest. "Who are you?" Amina asked. The woman laughed lightly. "Just someone who has seen God turn ashes into beauty. My name is Mama Titty. I sell akara down the street." Amina almost smiled. Something about Mama Titty's voice felt warm, like sunlight breaking through a dark window. "Would you like to help me at the stall today?" the woman asked suddenly. "I could use another pair of hands. I'll pay you something small." Amina blinked. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't worked in years, not since the bakery. "I don't know. New things don't always come in grand packages," Mama Titty said. "Sometimes, they start with small steps." Amina stared at the woman, then at the market bustling around her. For the first time in a long time, her heart nudged her toward yes. By 4 p.m., Amina stood behind a small wooden table, beside Mama Titty's akara stall. The oil sizzled in the big black pot, releasing a sweet, spicy aroma into the air. Customers lined up, drivers, schoolchildren, women returning from the market. "Use this spoon. Not your hands," Mama Titty said kindly, showing her how to drop the akara balls gently into the hot oil. It was clumsy at first. She burned her fingers once, laughed nervously, and almost gave up. But Mama Titty encouraged her with every mistake. Soon, Amina found herself smiling without realizing it. The customers chatted, the air filled with laughter and noise. And for the first time in years, Amina felt alive. When the sun dipped low and the last akara ball was sold, Mama Titty pressed a small wad of Naira notes into her hand. "Take it," she said. "You worked well." Amina stared at the money, small but real, and felt tears sting her eyes. It wasn't about the amount. It was the fact that something new had happened today. That night, as Amina lay in bed, she whispered the same prayer again. But this time, it didn't sound desperate. "Lord," she said softly, "thank you for today." And she slept without the usual weight on her chest. The days that followed were not perfect, but they were different. Every morning, Amina walked to the market to help Mama Titty. She learned to fry akara perfectly golden brown, to smile at strangers, to laugh again. She even started saving part of the little she earned, folding the Naira notes carefully in an old box beneath her bed. But God's new thing was not done yet. One Wednesday afternoon, as Amina wiped down the table after the lunch rush, a man approached the stall. "Good afternoon," he said politely. He was tall, in his late 30s, with a calm, thoughtful look in his eyes. He wore a simple white shirt tucked into black trousers. "Good afternoon," Amina replied, tucking a stray braid behind her ear. "2 wraps of akara please," he said, handing her some money. She wrapped the akara in brown paper and handed it to him. But instead of leaving, he smiled and asked, Do you work here every day? Yes, she said, surprised. He nodded. I've passed here several times, and I always see you smiling. It's refreshing. Amina blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had complimented her in years. My name is Daniel, he said, extending his hand. I'm opening a small eatery not too far from here. I'm looking for someone who knows their way around food. You look like someone who takes pride in her work. Her heart skipped. Me. He chuckled. Yes, you. Would you be interested in a better, paying job? Amina's hands trembled slightly, as she took the paper he offered. His business card. It felt unreal. Like she might wake up and find it all a dream. I'll think about it, she said softly. Please do. Daniel said, smiling. We need good hands like yours. As he walked away, Mama Titty gave Amina a knowing look. You see, when God begins, he doesn't stop halfway. The next week, Amina found herself standing in front of Daniel's new eatery. Grace Place. A bright yellow building with glass windows, and the smell of fresh bread wafting out. He welcomed her warmly and showed her around. She was nervous, unsure she was good enough. But Daniel reassured her. We grow together, he said. I don't hire people to be perfect. I hire people who are willing. She accepted the job. And just like that, her life shifted again. The following months were a slow, beautiful unfolding. Amina worked at Grace Place every day, helping bake pastries, fry snacks, and greet customers. Daniel noticed her dedication, her warmth, her quiet strength. The bakery began to flourish, and so did Amina. She no longer felt invisible. She began to see color in the world again. The golden hue of pastries fresh out of the oven. The blue of the sky after rain. The soft glow of lanterns in the evening. One day, Daniel invited her to join him for lunch after work. They sat under a tree near the eatery, sharing jollof rice and laughter. You've changed since the first time I saw you, he said softly. Amina smiled shyly. God did a new thing. But the journey wasn't without tests. One afternoon, months later, she returned home to find a letter from her estranged father. He had walked out on the family when she was 12, leaving behind pain that had never fully healed. He was sick now. Living in a small village, asking for forgiveness. Old wounds reopened. Anger and grief collided inside her chest. She sat alone that night, the letter in her trembling hands, whispering to God again. Lord, this is not the new thing I asked for. Why now? But deep down she heard a still, quiet voice. Forgiveness is also newness. A week later, she traveled to see him. The village air was thick with the smell of wet leaves and wood smoke. When she entered the small hut, she saw a frail man lying on a mat. Older, smaller, but unmistakably her father. Tears blurred her vision as she knelt beside him. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice weak. She took his hand, shaking. I forgive you. And in that moment, something inside her broke, then healed. A dam of old bitterness dissolved into peace. Life moved forward like a steady river. Amina began visiting her father often, helping him get medical care, bringing him warm food. Slowly, a relationship that once seemed impossible was rebuilt. Not perfect, but real. At the bakery, Grace Place expanded. Daniel opened another branch. And somewhere in the midst of shared work and shared prayers, something gentle began to blossom between them. One evening, after closing the shop, Daniel walked with her to the old mango tree in the market square, the very spot where she had first met Mama Titty. I've watched God write something beautiful with your life, he said softly. You've taught me what faith looks like, Amina felt her cheeks warm. She didn't know what to say. Daniel took a breath, reached into his pocket, and brought out a small velvet box. "I don't just want you as my best baker," he said, with a nervous laugh. "I want you as my partner. My wife." The world seemed to still. Amina's heart thumped like a drum. Tears welled in her eyes. Not the bitter kind, but the overflowing kind. "Yes," she whispered, smiling through tears. "Yes." On the day of their wedding, the rain fell in slow, soft drops again, just like that morning months ago. But this time, the rain wasn't a companion to her sorrow. It was a witness to her joy. Under a white canopy decorated with yellow flowers, surrounded by friends, church members, and a proud Mama Titty, Amina walked down the aisle. Her father, though weak, held her arm as they took each step together. Daniel stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on her with quiet reverence. When the pastor said, "You may now kiss the bride," the crowd erupted in laughter and cheers. Amina whispered silently as Daniel held her hand, "Lord, you really did a new thing in my life." But it didn't stop there. A year later, Grace Place became one of the most popular bakeries in the city. Amina now trained young women who were struggling. Women who, like her, had once believed life had passed them by. She gave them jobs, taught them skills, listened to their stories, prayed with them. She saw in their eyes what she once saw in the mirror: brokenness, waiting, yearning. And she told them the same thing Mama Titty had told her. New things don't always come in grand packages. Sometimes, they start with small steps. And she meant it. One evening, as she stood outside the bakery with Daniel and their newborn baby girl in her arms, she watched the sunset paint the sky with gold and crimson. "Remember the day I bumped into you at the bus stop?" Daniel said, chuckling. Amina laughed softly. "I thought nothing of it then. But God thought everything of it," he replied. She rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the soft scent of evening. "I prayed that day," she whispered. "I begged God to do a new thing in my life. I didn't know He'd do all of this." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "He always does more than we ask." The years later, as their daughter ran barefoot through the mango trees, Amina sat on the same old bench where it all began. She looked at the market bustling with life, at the akara stall still run by Mama Titty, now with younger helpers, and at the bakery shining like a warm beacon nearby. Her heart swelled with gratitude. The cracks on her wall at home were still there, but now they were reminders, not wounds. Reminders that even when life looks dry, even when it seems God is silent, He is quietly weaving miracles behind the scenes. "Lord," she whispered, not out of desperation this time, but out of overflowing joy, "thank you for doing a new thing in my life." And somewhere deep in her spirit, she felt it again. The soft, steady whisper, "I'm not done yet."